Oh, okay. You want to do it then? We can do it then. I just don't want to tie it. That's right. So do you want to do it other business instead? Yeah, I think that's what
Matthew's good. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, man. Yep.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Community and Health Services Committee together for April the 7th, 2016, and I'd like to call on Tim Brubaker, Regional Clerk, to conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig. Present. Chair Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Gowing.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Present. Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Present. Councillor Rodriguez.
Present.
Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovich. Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
As we begin this meeting, we are again reminded that many of our homes and places of employment in Waterloo region are situated on the land that is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Shawneetown peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to Waterloo region, and we also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and reaffirm our collective commitment to keep the promise that reconciliation takes place through learning and community building with the Indigenous people who continue to live here. We are all treaty people with a responsibility to honor our relations. I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder that we now reconvene into open session, or it can be by unanimous consent. Or motion, does it have to be?
We still need a mover and a seconder?
Okay, a moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Use your e-scribe icon to indicate. Any objections? Okay. Use your e-scribe to indicate your support.
We're good.
We're good, okay. Are there any allegations of pecuniary interest under the Conflict of Interest Act? None? We have no presentations. Our delegation, Susan Doyle, has withdrawn her delegation, so we're on to the regular agenda under item number 7, Homes for All. Our staff, Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Pettypair, are going to get their money's worth this afternoon, so we'll begin with 7.1.1. Mr. Sweeney.
Councillor Chair, thank you very much. Yes, so we've got 3 reports before you today. Ryan is with me here in the Horseshoe. I also want to acknowledge and say hi to all of our leaders from the housing team who have all had a hand in the various reports that come before you today. So our plan is Ryan's going to introduce each of the reports in turn, 2 for information and 1 for some direction, and we'll take your questions as you have them. And so appreciate your time and support of the ongoing work in housing and homelessness today. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peter, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'll start off by introducing our 10-year housing and homelessness plan report as the first one in sequence here. I believe we've got the housing continuum graphic queued up as well, and so we'll get that put up on screen. This is a graphic that is part of the appendix to this report. You will have all seen this before, but it does help explain how our various programs, plans, and reports are targeted to influence and achieve incomes and impact throughout the housing continuum, right from unsheltered homelessness all the way through to market housing. The 10-year housing and homelessness plan is a provincial requirement. Through legislation, we are required to produce these and based on the scope that the province provides us. Our previous 10-year housing and homelessness plan ran its course through 2025, and we have now received direction and scope from the province to complete our next 10-year housing and homelessness plan. The approach that we take locally is based on our existing planning frameworks that target these various sections of the housing continuum, as you have on the screen and in your appendix. You'll be familiar with these plans. These are the plan to end chronic homelessness, our revitalization plan for Waterloo Regional Housing, our Building Better Futures program, and the end of mortgage work that supports the not-for-profit and co-op housing sectors overall. The report that's in front of you today outlines our approach to meeting the provincial scope of direction, essentially amalgamating those plans into the one document that is required through provincial legislation, provides the timeline that we're working on to meet those requirements. We need to submit our completed plan by the end of May to the province for their review and feedback. They've got a 90-day window that they use to do that. And then they provide us back the plan with any comments that they have. At that point in time, it then comes back in front of committee and council for any further feedback, input, or revisions that need to be made before we have a completed and actionable 10-year plan. So the report that's in front of you outlines that process, outlines the timeline, and gives you a rough outline of the plan that will be submitted to the province. And again, it is based on extensive planning work that we have done to date and that you have been a part of and approved as they target various points of the housing continuum overall. Happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you. We do have a few questions. Councillor Hunek.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ryan. I was going to ask the question of how this differs from the plans on chronic homelessness, but I think you answered that. So if I understand correctly, it's the provincial umbrella report that houses the plans on chronic homelessness? Question mark.
Through you, Chair. You got it, Councillor. So the plan to end chronic homelessness, as we already have approved and are working on and are actioning in this community, becomes a part of what forms the submission for this larger umbrella 10-year housing and homelessness plan. That's the homelessness component specifically of that plan that goes to the province.
Great, thanks.
Councillor Salin.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much, staff, for bringing this forward. I'm just wondering logistically, I know Appendix A is the approach, and you had mentioned that more was coming back for council, but I'm curious in specific on section 6, which also happens to be page 6, the constraints and considerations. And I know that you go into the financial feasibility. I think that's really important considering we talk around this horseshoe a lot about how the upper tier should, like the provincial government should be funding this more. So I'm just curious if you could speak to what you're going to be including in that, / if this is really an appropriate place to elaborate. Like, I'd love to see you throw in even more numbers as to maybe then the province will do something, but I'm not certain if that's appropriate for what the province is expecting of this document.
Thanks for the question, Councillor, and you're happy to answer that one. I think it's absolutely an appropriate opportunity to put that type of need in front of the province. There'll be 47 other service managers across the province that will be articulating similar pieces. And I think having all of that in front of the province and taking the opportunity to do so for what we provide them by the end of the May is absolutely appropriate and part of our plan.
Great, thank you, and I look forward to seeing that more in the plan.
Councillor James.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. I just have a question, and staff, thank you for the report and the ongoing work. I just have a couple questions around some of the data. So in the report, you speak of improved data quality desegregation. Can you speak a little bit more to what type of desegregated data is being collected to help inform this? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So just making sure we're still on the 10-year housing and homelessness plan report, Councillor, okay, because we do have a data report that's later in the package as well. So yeah, part of what that report will speak to is switching over how we collect and do this work in terms of data desegregation. What's being produced for this, for the province, is around a housing needs assessment. So articulating exactly what's needed in this community and for whom, so that we can put that in front of the province and put our own actions forward specifically. Around the housing need, our ability to desegregate historically has not been not been as robust as we're hoping it's going to be through this changeover in data collection in the future. Part of that is based on how we ask and how we collect this data, also what's available through the census. So it is improving, but overall, right down to some of the demographics that we think would overall better improve or support the system. We're just not at that level of capacity yet.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I think my question's sort of been answered. I guess I just wanted to explore also the dollars that we're spending over and above what is being allocated. And, you know, quite a number of years ago now, the Council of the Day decided that it was the right thing to do to put money into upstream funding and homelessness. This is part of it. And I think you kind of answered the question for Councillor Salonen about including numbers that show how much it's costing us over and above what it, if I can use air quotes, should be costing us.
Thanks for the question. So to clarify, yes, what we'll be articulating for the province is total need to resolve housing and homelessness issues in the region of Waterloo. Also, we can further break that down in terms of provincial and federal and municipal investment overall and articulate what the gap remaining is. And as you pointed out, Councillor, we are always trying to find the balance of investing upstream wherever we can, but also being able to respond to the emergent need that is constantly in front of us as well, and making that shift over time. So that's part of what will get articulated and submitted to the province.
Thanks. And then, sorry if I can just add or maybe augment a little bit. The dollars that we're putting in are saving dollars in other areas. And I know that might take a lot of work to put together. We've done it in the past, but you know, when you've got some spare time, sometime you might want to do that.
Mr. Snee?
Yeah, if I could just build off of it for council's awareness, Ryan alluded to it. Ryan sits at a provincial housing leads table, and I sit at a 47 lead, so that's all 47 service system managers. There's a concerted effort given that this is a requirement of all 47 to ensure that our messaging from each of the municipality and the service system managers going to the province has that consistent language around investment, and also building off of the good work that AMO has done in their 2 successive homelessness reports too. So we're coming at it from all sides, Councillor.
And partly, if I remember from our budget this past year, we were putting in $212 million more here than what normally we would be doing if the province was stepping up to the plate. Does that sound right? 212 million? Okay. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thanks to all the staff who do not only the work on the report, but the really hard work in the community, supporting people who are very vulnerable. Yeah, I actually was one of the comments that I start with a comment, because earlier today, one of our colleagues made the comment about, you know, people facing some hardships because of the regional budget, or sorry, the regional property tax, the regional property tax rate, which is, you know, fair enough, but the regional property tax rate, as you just mentioned, is being really heavily influenced because we're spending far and above, well, 220 some million more than we really should be if the province, and in some cases the federal government, was stepping up with their responsibilities. So, and that has a huge impact on the property tax rate. So just wanted to share that. But my question with this is really about some of the gender issues with respect to homelessness, housing and homelessness. And I'm just curious, is there a breakdown, or is that in the data report around the approximate number of women or people who identify as women who who are homeless or precariously housed. And I'm just wondering how, looking with a gender-based lens, how that maybe has changed some of our approach or should be changing some of our approach to this.
Mr. Bertier?
Thanks for the question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So we do have a bit of that breakdown in the data report that is further down in the agenda. When we look at overall homelessness, though, that report, and it's in the appendix, breaks down the gender split about 65-35, so about 65% male, 35% female identifying individuals when it comes to total homelessness across the region.
And how would that, because we've heard also in other reports and around here, but just in the broader community about the hidden homelessness, particularly that hits women. How is that accounted for? And I know it's hard to not count things people or things you can't see, but how do we kind of think about the hidden homelessness piece?
Homelessness in general is incredibly difficult to count and to enumerate overall. What the data report speaks to is the switch that we're making as a more community-based way to get at exactly that. We think that there will be better and more accurate data collected in the future. Additional ways we try to get at hidden homelessness, and by its very definition, is hard to quantify because it is hidden. And we know that impacts women that are homelessness specifically, more so than males. One of the other ways that we try to address that on a semi-regular basis is through point-in-time counts. And so that is a sort of a blitz count that we do every couple of years that also tries to enumerate to the best of our ability what exactly that hidden homelessness number is looking like. We think it will always be underrepresented in any forms of those counts, but those are some of the ways that we're trying to get better at it. What the data report further articulates is we need to get better not only at a regional staff level, but at a systems level in using this data to drive the decisions that we make out in the community. And we have telegraphed through a few previous reports on developing data strategy. This is the start of that and getting better at making those systems decisions using data that has been collected with integrity overall, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sweeney, you want to respond as well?
No, I just want to make sure that I'm just clarifying. There's been some numbers suggested. So there's been a couple of folks reference the $200 million number related to provincials. That's region-wide. That's not specifically to housing and homelessness. So I just want to make sure that we're clarifying that. And in our last budget, just for some perspective, our homelessness, but specifically for homelessness programs, the ratio of municipal funding versus provincial funding is 1-to-1.
Chair Redden.
I want to thank you for this, these reports, and I'm actually always blown away at the disaggregated data that you're able to give us about the homeless population. I'm really glad to know that Ryan and Peter at these provincial tables, I know AMO hired Pear Tree, and they did sort of a province-wide snapshot, not only of what homelessness looked like a year ago, but also a trajectory that was pretty disturbing. It's great that you're having common language. Do we compare our numbers, and not that it's a competition in any way, but as far as homeless people per population and money that the region is sort of, for lack of a better word, backfilling that other levels of government could or should be spending for supports, how we stack up to other comparable regions?
Mr. Pierre.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. Yes, we're constantly comparing across municipalities. This, as it's been alluded to already today, this council often takes the approach of doing the right thing. The right thing is rarely the inexpensive thing as well. And so we're proud to do the work here. We're proud of the approach and the support of council in this municipality. It's not the same across the province. There are others that are in similar situations, and others that take a different approach overall as well. I think one of the more exciting things for me, when you look at the data report that's a little later on the agenda, you'll see some of the outcomes that we don't always spend a lot of time talking about either. We talk about the dollars and the programs, but there is a chronically homeless person in this community that's housed every single day. In terms of total homelessness, there are multiple homeless people that are housed every single day, and that's thanks to the approach and the contributions that we take here in this region. It makes a direct and impactful difference in the community.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Foxon?
Through you, Chair, thank you so much, gentlemen and ladies, for what you do. It's an amazing accomplishment you've done over the years. To get back to Councillor McCabe's question on women, I have great concerns about it, as we're well aware, not because of any fault of the regions, but because a lot of the agencies will not take the women in because they're abused, especially women with children. So speaking to Kim Decker at the YMCA, I go, where do they go? Or the YWCA. She goes, they hide in the bush. They hide in the bush as much as they can, or they on a parked car. They try to be invisible so they won't be abused, but that they can keep their children with them. And it's a concern, and she's working very hard, and I'm very proud of the things she's accomplished. I only wish we could do more, but we can't at this time, unless there's funding. But I wanted us to be aware that women homelessness is hidden because they choose to hide for their own safety. And someday maybe we can be bright enough to turn that around and maybe create some trust. But yeah, a lot of the facilities will not take them because the men abuse them or the children, so they can't go. Thank you.
Councillor McCabe?
Thank you. Is this the time I could ask a question about the path list, or is that in the next report?
Mr. Pettier?
Happy to take that question
Okay.
now, Councillor.
Thanks very much. So, I mean, I have a general understanding of how the path lists operates, but I'm just wondering, could you share some information around how flexible it is? Because I've heard some concerns from some people in one of the shelter, in one of the organizations in Waterloo, but they operate across the region as well, with respect to the acuity level of people sometimes who are taken off the list, put into supportive housing, and the impact that has on what are sometimes really long-term residents in an affordable housing unit. So I'm just curious what kind of flexibility or how you manage what is probably a really difficult decisions in terms of trying to match the acuity level so that people who've lived a long time in one of the residents still feel safe in their own home.
Mr. Pettier?
Thank you. So yes, the PATHS process is specific to our supportive housing stock in the system across the region. PATHS is an acronym that stands for Prioritize Access to Housing Supports. And so it's a separate waitlist program for people that need the supportive housing system to be successfully housed. It's a process managed regionally with the support of Starling as the agency to do that. It's a process that's managed in terms of acuity, so highest level of need balanced against chronological order. So it's a process and a list that's managed that way. So the higher your need, or the higher you've been on the list, the longer you've been on the list, the higher up that you are. When a vacancy comes up in the system, it then becomes a conversation with the landlord or the operator of that property and what's going on at that building currently. Putting all high acuity people in one place is not a recipe for a healthy living environment either. So it becomes a conversation on, is it going to be the correct place for the individual that's next on the list? It's the operator, the landlord of the property that has final say based on what on that conversation overall. The majority of our supportive housing properties are all supportive housing. There are a couple legacy properties, though, that flipped from a domiciliary hostel model to supportive housing in the early 2000s. And there's some legacy tenants in those buildings that didn't come in through that particular past process. And I think that's probably the instance that you're referring to, Councillor. That is also an added challenge where somebody had originally been living in a home that was based on affordability, and now it's a home that is designated on both affordability and support needs. And so we try to manage those challenges as they come up in any of our properties on a tenant-by-tenant basis. But that would be a particular challenge in a specific instance at a specific property.
So how do you actually balance that then? Like someone who's a long-term resident in what wasn't, like they were there for an affordability or maybe an accessibility issue, and now there's people with, maybe really high acuity or addictions or mental health challenges. How do you balance that?
And it's a good question, and it's like in any of our properties as well, whether they're supportive housing or not. There's various needs of our tenants, and those needs change over time as well. So it's a case by case basis depending on what's going on. If there's a specific tenant that is causing problems, then we have a specific path to deal with that through the provider, through the landlord and tenant board to address that particular tenancy. If it's somebody that's feeling unsafe in their home, it's a conversation with them around what those specifics are. It's a conversation with the provider on how they, and the landlord on how they support that individual. Or it could be a discussion on, is there another place or another unit that we have available that you'd be more comfortable in living. And so it gets down into that sort of individual specifics based on what's going on at any given time in the building.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up then more directly. Thank you.
Okay, this 7.1 is for information. Thank you for that presentation. We'll all now move on to 7.1.2 on the data update. Ryan, you want to continue?
Sure, I'll carry on. I feel like I've introduced this one probably already through a couple of responses. So this is, again, an information report advising on some changes to how we collect and how we use data moving forward. And as I previously alluded to as well, our plans for using this more specifically to drive decisions and also to inform council about the state of homelessness in this community overall. I think I can stop there and can address any more specific questions, though, Chair.
Okay. Are there any questions on this? I don't see any, so that was for information. Thank you. Item 7.1.3, an update on the Moorgate redevelopment. Mr. Sweeney, you're on.
Certainly, I will. I'll turn it over to Ryan again in a second, but just to acknowledge that you will recall back in November, we brought forward some information relative to our WRH revitalization plan and both the impact that was having on our community and the folks we're trying to serve, but also as an organization on our capital plan and the subsequent debt servicing limits that would put on that. We were asked at that time to come back by the end of Q1 with some options. Ryan can, it's all in the report there to lay out. But I also do want to say and acknowledge again that the number of our staff team are here today and folks who have been working on our Building Better Futures for a number of years. And so any ongoing work to reconsider this and consider the financial implications does have an impact, and it is difficult. And I just want to, while they're all here, to say thank you for all of the work that you continue to put into this effort, this challenging file. I believe we're still going in the right direction. We might just be needing to take a slower pace, but I just want to thank the entire team for everything that you put forward for the people in this community. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Ryan for the report.
Peter.
Thanks, Peter, and through you, Chair. So yes, as Peter alluded to, this is response to council direction back in November. After receiving that direction, staff worked with cost consultants to model various different scenarios that could move this project forward, albeit in a different way than was originally envisioned when it was approved back in 2019. In running all of those scenarios, the consultant, Enberry Lyons Consultant Limited, NBLC, concluded that none of those scenarios in the current market environment would be feasible without a significant capital contribution from the region to incentivize it moving forward. So after receiving that, after reviewing the options that were analyzed by the consultant, staff arrived at the difficult recommendation that you have in front of you, in that we continue to postpone the redevelopment of Moorgate while we look at some other opportunities that may exist through the issuance of an expression of interest framework specific to working with not-for-profits and co-ops, and looking at additional funding opportunities that may be available, specifically like Build Canada Homes or other opportunities that may exist. For now, the recommendation would be that we continue to hold on the property, explore those opportunities, and report back to council with what may be feasible from there.
Thank you. We do have some questions. Councillor Hunick?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Ryan, for the report. It's my understanding that Moorgate tenants were relocated for this expansion and redevelopment. And so I'm wondering how long ago they were relocated, and also what are the impacts on them, or like potential impacts, I guess you could say, if we wait longer.
Thanks for the question, Councillor, and for your concern for the tenants. It's one of our concerns as well. The report does highlight feedback that we received from tenants as well, and in what a change to the current plan would mean for them. So it's a voice that we're keenly aware of as well. The majority of our tenants have been relocated to additional Waterloo regional housing properties. Others have different arrangements, and we'd continue to monitor that and to take care and support them as best we can. They've all been relocated at this point for years, and we'll continue to remain in touch with them, and also communicate the outcome of today's decision and any future considerations for the property as well. We remain concerned for them and what happens for them next too.
But they've already been living in their current place for approximately 4 years.
Some not quite as long as 4 years. Just checking, relocation finished over a year ago now. So some have been relocated for longer than a year. At the very least, though, it's been at least over a year.
Okay, thanks.
You're
welcome. Councillor Rodriguez.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I want to thank staff for bringing this report back. I think it paints a really, it's an unfortunate situation that council and staff are put in with making this decision. I think it's the recommendation in front of us is what we have. It's just really unfortunate that we got to this point, both last year and now again. And so, and to Councillor Hunick's line of questioning, right, this directly impacts the folks that have already been moved out of the site by prolonging this delay. But I think we have some good steps to go forward from here. And I think we've had a few conversations in recent committee cycles about, you know, the scale of projects that we have on our books right now. And you know, it speaks to our priorities as a community when, you know, we can't find a way to get this to go through, but some other projects have landed on our books that are going ahead without this type of analysis and type of passion. So I'll leave that there for now. I guess my question, I have two questions. The first is, you know, we have a site that's now empty and demolished and vacant in the community. And I think part of what I was interested in through that motion in November was what steps can we take now to ready the site or continue to chip away at any, environmental work that needs to happen, any site remediation work. Can you comment on if anything of that nature can happen now while we figure out who our new partners are?
Mr. Petitpier.
Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor. So what we have in the budget, and we'll continue to do on site readiness, is complete demolition at the site and secure that and ensure that it is secured moving forward. Regardless of what happens at the site readiness work is going to need to be completed. So we'll continue along that path, knowing that that will help move forward expeditiously, no matter what is decided for the future of this property.
And thanks for that, Ryan. I think another question that I have is, so we're proposing to pursue an expression of interest process, which I think is great, and I look forward to that. But I think we need to move incredibly quickly at a preliminary level to understand who those partners are. I understand there's a lot of mechanics of actually baking in a full agreement or putting out an RFP or some type of formal tender, but could you comment on specifically when we might be able to get back a sense of who those partners are, what the interest is, what's the pulse is? Because I think there's an inherent tension in the report that acknowledges that even something like Build Canada Homes is no sure shot to get this done. And probably all of it has to happen to get it done. But I think in my conversations with some of these community partners since this report came out, they're very interested in this project, and I think there are paths forward with them. We just need to figure that out and get it, identify who that is. And so could you speak to the timing of when we might be able to? And I mean, I know reports are a big deal, but could we get an update at an appropriate time on when that process has concluded, just to keep people accountable? We need to keep ourselves accountable, but also to the residents that have been displaced, and this is one of our top priorities. So.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, going back to my opening comment, this is a shift in plans for this organization. It's a shift in plans for the team and folks who have put a lot of time, effort into this. This is a priority piece of work for us. We will, expeditiously move to have conversations with potential partners. I can think of a few off the top of my head. We have to also make sure, or I want to make sure that from a legal and a procurement perspective, that we don't put the proverbial cart before the horse. So we will make sure whatever conversations we have through an EOI period or process are proper and legitimate and comply with are compliant, and to move that exceptionally quickly as much as we can. I think the initial foray to say to the community and those potential partners of, what's the art of the possible, is the relatively easy and quick step. It's the analysis and the determining and the business case, because the financial realities of cost of construction and the mix that we're hoping to achieve here, those dollars don't change whether you have a private partner or for a nonprofit. But we can make some assumptions that perhaps a coalition of the willing could come together. And so I guess what I will commit to council is we will move on this immediately. And as soon as we can put some firm dates in terms of when we can come back, we will do that. But please know that this is a priority piece of work for us. And we want to see this succeed in a way that makes sense, that also doesn't hamstring future councils and future staff budgets with significant debt servicing that we simply can't afford. So we will be moving as fast as possible.
And Chair, if I may, just to clarify, I wasn't trying to insinuate that this wasn't a priority for staff. I know this is a true labor of love, and an immense amount of work has gone to this point. But I think from a public perspective, people don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And so I recognize that work and thank everyone for that work. I just want to, how do we pull it out of the shadows as much as we can to keep going? So thank you.
Councillor Gowing.
Thanks, Chair. I know Councillor Rodriguez answered or asked one of my questions. The other one that I have is we say next steps could be exploring opportunities through the BCH funding. Have we already explored that, or are we at that point? Where are we in that process?
Through you, Chair. So yeah, we've started the process with BCH. We wanted to bring this report to council before we move anything officially forward. We have some meetings set up. We've been attending their webinars and understanding what they do and how their process is going to work. But we haven't put anything formal for consideration in front of BCH to this point.
Okay, so that's one of the potential areas that we're going to look at. I just want to reference, and I know, Ryan, that we talked about this earlier today. One of the other considerations is a housing corporation for ownership. I don't want to tie it to Moorgate, but I have a motion that I'm bringing forward. Hopefully we can either deal with it today or deal with it at council on looking at exploring a municipal housing corporation. It's under other business if you want to take a look at that now. But I know that is going to be a major step forward, and we've been working on it since December, so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And again, thank you to staff for your work on this. I'm going to come from a different perspective now because I have had conversations with members of the community who are currently there. I'm speaking of neighborhood associations who've approached me about this project and, not hearing anything, but obviously we're getting something today. I'm just wondering, and, think of the ward councillor there, Margaret Johnson, if there is going to be information that can be shared with like the neighborhood associations for this group, because this is a community within a community. And as much as we've rehoused those who are living there, there is still an impact on the community, knowing that the community that there needs to be something to involve the association, the neighborhood associations, and what that looks like in terms of communicating, because they're very excited about this project and what it would do for the neighborhood as a whole.
Thanks for the question, Councillor, and through you, Chair. No problem. We happy to connect with the neighborhood associations, the ward councillors, and previous tenants as part of the next steps after today.
Okay, and then just one final follow-up question, and it's in regard to our wait list numbers for housing. I know, Peter, you and I, sometimes you get those emails from me of people who are waiting. What is the current list for our housing?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Our latest numbers have us just about 11,500 on our current centralized wait list in terms of applications.
And growing. Okay, thank you. It's hard to hear those numbers, and in the crisis and the financial economy that we're in, hopefully you all, with funding hopefully coming, we move this forward as quick as possible, because I know there's been people waiting for probably a decade to get into housing. So it is a growing concern for our area.
Okay, there are no other speakers. We do have a motion for this item, so I'm looking for a mover. Moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Harris. If you use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support, please.
I'm in favor.
To item 7.2.1, Youth Voices Driving Community Change. We have a report before us for information, and Matthew Chandy is going to start that off for us. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Erb. The report before committee today has to do with the data and action work that's been ongoing by the Children and Youth Planning Table. It's specifically a youth-led initiative that comes out of the survey that was done for young people in Waterloo region back in 2023. That was where the information is rooted, and since then, it's been about extracting the data and having sense-making sessions with youth across the region to prioritize the areas of focus that you see as important to Waterloo Region moving forward. And again, there was a lot of work that's been going into this, and so today, Jim Moss, the co-chair of the Children and Youth Planning Table, along with Dan Imran, who is one of our youth connectors and is online today, will be giving you a bit of an overview of the work that's been underway by youth in this community and some of the priorities that are now starting to come forward from that work. So I'll turn it over to Jim and Dan to provide the update.
Thank you, Matthew. I'll get going pretty quickly here. Hi, Dan. Good to see you there. Can you hear me? Good? Excellent. So my name's Jim Moss. I'm grateful to be with you today. I'm the co-chair of the Children and Youth Planning Table. As a reminder, we're a collective, a collaborative that brings together organizations, youth, and decision makers from across the region who serve children and youth. Can I get the slide deck up? There we go. Yeah. All right. There we go. So, actually, can you move to the next slide there now? Thank you. According to the last census and using our data and research team, there are 128,960 children and youth who call the Waterloo region home. CYPT is the only entity who focuses entirely and only on that population. Slide, please. There is no other region in the country that we're aware of who has such robust data collected through the voices of the children and youth in their region. And so I highlight that that is a benefit that you have as both elected officials and staff to have this much and this high quality of data to consider when thinking about the strategy and the action planning of your work. Next slide, please. So our effort represented here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dan, was to collect data, of which we collected about 1,800 voices and went through a long process that Dan is going to talk to you about. And then we arrived at 6 priorities. And when I say we, children and youth working together with adults arrived at 6 priorities, of which one was more youth voices in adult decision-making spaces. And so I would like to turn it over to Dan to share the rest of the presentation with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Adan Imran, and I'm currently a second-year student at McMaster University. And I want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to join virtually because I truly did want to be there in person, but being in the thick of exam season, I didn't have the means to make that happen, unfortunately. I first joined the Children Youth Planning Table as a youth connector in 9th grade, and last year I had a full circle moment stepping into a role focused on child care. These experiences shaped how I understand youth voices and how the gap between adults and youth can be bridged through opportunity. And that brings me to the work that we've been doing together. We started, next slide please. We started in May of 2023 with the Youth Impact Survey, where we heard from over 1,800 diverse young people about what life was like for them in Waterloo Region. Next, we mobilized this data out to youth and adults in the community via our data brief and disaggregated snapshots. Then, through 2024 and 2025, our Youth Engagement Systems Lead and our 3 youth staff engaged youth from across the cities and townships to make sense of the data and identify what would meaningful change look like to them. This process resulted in over 600 ideas from over 2,500 youth across the community. Then the work began to narrow those 600 ideas down to a top list of 40. Next slide, please. And here on our website, youth and adults can find the whole list of the 40 actions. Next slide, please. And so through a series of workshops with youth led by our youth staff, those 40 actions were further prioritized into a top 6 list. Adult members around the Children Youth Planning Table were engaged in sharing insights and knowledge that they had about these 40 ideas so that youth could make the most informed choices possible. In November at our annual conference, Data and Action was released. The top 6 were revealed, and youth and adults in the room started brainstorming on how to advance these 6 actions. Next slide, please. And here they are, the top 6 priorities for action as identified by youth in our community. Supports for long-term housing solutions, access to family physicians, resources for newcomer parents, more accountability for bullying in schools, expand public transformation routes, and more opportunities for youth involvement in decision-making. As you can see, these are large, complex priorities that youth have landed on. and they are often areas that have work underway in our community. Many of these are also not exclusive only to the youth population. For anyone working towards any of these 6, keep going. You may have thoughts about these topics as things adults care about, but guess what? Your youngest citizens also see them as being a top priority, so please keep going. Next slide, please. As for next steps, members recognize CYPT as leaders in the community when it comes to youth involvement in decision-making. We will now be mobilizing CYPT members to understand the decision-making landscape, identify opportunities for impact and change, along with building capacity and supports for adult allies. With regards to the other 5 priorities, there is a key role for CYPT to play in bridging a connection between those leading in priority areas and youth in our community. As immediate next steps, we will be connecting with leaders in the 5 additional action areas to inform them of the input of our youngest citizens, as well as identify potential connection points for youth desiring further involvement. And finally, we want to have solid accountability back to youth in the community. So over the next few months, we will also be working to create a youth-friendly mechanism to monitor and track change across these 6 areas of priority. And with this, I will pass it back to Jim to circle us back with the survey cycle and end us off.
All right, thanks, Dan. Great work. So before we end our time and move into questioning, just point out where we're at in the cycle. So the tail end of this 3-year-long process is to arrive at these strategies, disseminate them, and build them into our own strat plan. And now we move into the next round of data collection. So the previous round was in 2023, and on May 1st, we will start the data collection for the next stage of the process. Next slide, please. So the Youth Impact Survey will be live again in our community throughout the entire month of May. We have 12 youth survey ambassadors ready to help connect their peers and networks to this opportunity to have their voices heard. Member organizations, of which there are 72 voting members and almost 100 organizations in total. Those organizations will be mobilized into collecting survey responses from children and youth across the region. We would very much appreciate your help and support when this activity goes live. 3 years ago in 2023, we were able to hear from over 1,800 young people from across the region, the cities, and the townships. And our member organizations used the data from that survey to bring $2.99 million just last year alone into the region to support the services that they deliver. So we're able to use this data in so many very rich ways, and the members themselves can use it to support their own fiscal capacity and sustainability. It's a team effort throughout the month of May, and we look forward to having you on the team. Please stay tuned, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, and we do have some questions, so you stay there. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim and Dan, for your presentation and report. I'm sure it's not easy, especially in exams. Thank you for your dedication to youth and for bringing to light your joys and your concerns for Council's awareness and for Council's action. The one piece of the piece of the report that most concerns me is that so many of our youth would represent their mental health and well-being as fair or poor. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, is that similar across Canada? Is there a problem unique to Waterloo region? And what can we do as council to help you bring more of those people's mental health into the good or excellent range?
Yeah. That's a super excellent question, Councillor. Thank you so much. In 2021, the first ever report on youth well-being was generated by the federal government. At that time, they engaged 996 youth, ages 15 to 33. And so their findings were quite similar. In terms of the categorical aspects and specific to mental health as being a super important and pressured impact of their overall well-being. Our data demonstrated similarity in terms of like categorical, but we were able to get into a little bit more detail. And so specifically how that dovetails into some of the priorities that we saw. For example, children and youth 13% reported homelessness, having experienced visible or invisible. And if they did, their sense of belonging was more than 15% lower than others. Their likelihood of their well-being being reported as below average or causing problems with them was over 25% higher. So not only were we able to identify that children and youth in our region are experiencing pressures on their mental health similar to children across the entire country, we're able to understand how those things intersect with the challenges that you're talking about today and every day in the work that you do. And so when thinking about how best to support youth in the region, I think I would echo partly what Adan said, which is keep going, right? But when you're doing that work, don't forget to consider children and youth. When we're doing, there's been no request for a 10-year plan on children and youth well-being. So when you're making yours for homelessness and the unhoused population, don't forget that 13% of young people under the age of 18 experience it as well, and that almost doubled from 3 years prior to that. So we're here as an asset and a resource. Whenever you have questions or important work to do, if you don't have the data close at hand to say, how will this impact children and youth? How can we support their health and their well-being? Please reach out and ask, and we'll either get it or get it on the list of data to collect in our next effort.
Thank you for that informative and doable response. Can we note that maybe that the next housing and homelessness plan include a youth section? Is that possible, Peter? Or is there one already that I didn't read?
Yeah, certainly. Part of the benefit of the plan to end chronic homelessness is the real attempt to get to specific populations and specific experiences, and to try to build out plans that respond to those unique needs. And certainly, children and youth and families is part of that.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thanks, Chair. And Jim, thanks for being here, and Adan, nice to see you. Thanks for the presentation. I want to pick up on actually where you left off, I think, is this idea of we have all this data set available, and this may not be a question to you, but rather to our staff team. How can we leverage this data in our work, right? Look at the top 6 priorities. A lot of them touch on more, collaboration. There's some, more accountability in school spaces. Oh, that's something we need to collaborate on, or others will lead on. But some have very direct implications on the work that we do. And when we talk about greater access to public transportation, for example, we cut bus routes that served high schools through budget this year. Mm-hmm. That is a contradiction to me, and it would have been great to kind of feed into this conversation. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but I'd also open to staff if they have thoughts on how this can feed into their data and not duplicate work. We don't need to re-engage, rehash the emphasis on some of these priorities.
Yeah, great question. I appreciate that. So every time we make a decision, if we get into the habit of considering how that impacts children and youth, right, we can reach out and look for the data. But really, no data set is perfect, right? It's just more information to consider in our decision-making process. And it can't give us perfect confidence, but improve confidence. So for example, youth who responded to the survey in the previous round from the townships specifically asked for transit access, right? While other youth in different regions were asking for price and cost-effective access or ease of access, different youth in different places were asking for different things. And you're never able to satisfy every population group, right? And nor does the citizenship expect you to do that. But to have an answer and to know that there's an answer required and then get the answer to the population who wasn't able to be satisfied in the most recent decision-making, that shows them that you're listening, and it lets them know that it's on the radar. I think we can do a better job. As CYPT, we're a pretty small backbone team, and we have a lot of volunteers and young people who are at university currently. We can do a better job, and we're trying to do that through our strat plan to get more involved, make ourselves more available, and build stronger relationships so that while you build the muscles to think, to ask, we are building the muscle of making sure that data is in front of you. I took the opportunity this morning to send the most recent annual report to all of the elected officials. And so we'll try our best to get the data to you, and if you can try your best to think to ask for it or how it could be applied specifically.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for me, what's really glaringly missing, and it's something that I work hard to try to as part of what I want to leave behind when I'm finished my work on this earth, is mental health, addictions to alcohol and drugs. I don't see it as any of your priority actions. So since that is what is destroying our society today, how did that not be one of your priority actions, one of your 6? Like, where is that difference in thinking from adults in leadership to the youth planning table?
So that's an excellent question. I'm glad that you posed it. This is actually a really important reason to have the data from the children and youth, because they're different than we were. They're different than we were at their age, and they're different than how we think now. Fortunately or gratefully, chronologically, they are upstream of all of the things that you just mentioned, mental health, addictions, et cetera. They are chronologically the upstream intervention to those things. When we analyze the data and we take that data out to them to make sense of, right, and then to make priorities of, some of those things were in the list, but they're not experiencing and reporting them as being problematic, in competition to those top 6 things at this time, prior to the age of 18. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? Doesn't mean that it's not a problem. It means that that problem is slowly, festering or beginning in this age group, right? The highest end of our respondents is age 18. So fortunately, we're not seeing a majority of children in that age group reporting this as problematic yet. So that's where the adults have to interpret. As we move through time, these things become more and more problematic. If we don't have access to good jobs and employment, if we don't have access to home, if it's hard to have the meals that we need, these things all snowball into the containers where we catch adults in their unhealthiest places. And so by solving and supporting these things, access to a family doctor, access to affordable housing for the family, you'll notice that the 2 of them very clearly, they're asking for people they care about. They're asking for their newcomer families and their parents to have better access to families. If we do those things, statistically, and the research would suggest that we reduce the mental health and the substance abuse problems that show up later in adult life. So I validate and I respect your considering your legacy, and I'm happy to answer on behalf of children and youth to say it's not showing up as a tremendous problem for the age group that we ask questions of. I would expect if we went up to the age of 30, we would start to hear it much more squarely. But if we can support the things that they need, which are also already on your docket, you are less likely to see the numbers grow as they move downstream into the mental health and addiction problems that you mentioned.
So if I could just chime in on that, bouncing off of what Jim has said, I think a lot of these things that we have mentioned in terms of the top 6 priority actions are prevalent in being some of the root cause to mental health problems. And so when youth are kind of forced to choose between essential needs, it's really clear how much pressure there is on that. And so we've had to work through over 600 of these types of actions and narrow those down to 6, which include mental health related things. And one of the processes that we actually took was kind of grouping them into this. So how is mental health related to these problems? So the 600 actions that we had to bring down to 6 included this as a category. And so if youth can come together and distill 600 actions into 6 of them, and I think it's coming at a root cause, because I think one of the things that maybe is getting a bit overlooked is accountability for bullying in schools. And whether we go track that down to middle school or high school, that's a very big reason as to why youth and younger people experience mental health issues, because they're not feeling safe in a place that is meant to be safe. And that's why a lot of our actions are asking for people that we have access to family physicians, resources for newcomer parents. These things are going to make it easier for youth to kind of come out of that bubble and actually explore more, and it's targeting majority of those root causes. So I think it is fair to say that adults and systems can commit to implementing at least 6 of these and keep youth in mind when doing so, because I think mental health has to do with everything. I think all of the 6 actions that we've mentioned, mental health does absolutely have a role in that. And although it's not explicitly mentioned, I assure you it is absolutely a part of the category from when we went down from 600 actions to 6.
Okay, thank you, because that makes me feel so much better to know that it is part of the planning table, because I know how bad it is out there, and it can't be ignored. It just can't be. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Gowing?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Jim and Adan, for bringing this forward. The work that you guys are doing is just phenomenal. Couple questions. I noticed in your larger list that in 2022, financial literacy was number 24, and in your most recent one, it's moved up on the list, which is good to see, up to 20. It still hasn't made into the top 10, which I thought it might, but where does that come from? Like, what, can you give me a little more information on how and where that came from?
How does it get into that spot on the list specifically?
It's in number 20 on the list, yeah.
So as Dan mentioned, we went through a process of the 600 possible things, and then a number of rounds of sense-making sessions with adults and with youth to prioritize. And these were great sessions, and we'll invite you to the future ones. If you get a chance to come and sit around a table with a handful of youth from all corners of the region, the talk is really, it's serious, and they take it seriously, and they talk about their own examples, but they're also quick to talk about the examples that they know of from other youth, their friendship groups, right, the kids at school. Now, while we don't, and we won't now because of these 6 directly as CYPT address priorities kind of 7 and above directly, of the 100 membership organizations, a number of them provide supports for financial literacy. So where we will support more directly these top 6 priorities, we will then support by supporting our membership organizations and the community service providers to address the problems that are kind of further down the list. So, so just because they're not in the top 6 doesn't mean that they're not getting surface area of support. It's the prioritization process. And I actually kind of hope that it goes in the opposite direction and it moves off the list entirely. You know, that will help. Allison, do you want to comment as well? Come on in. This is Allison, the head of the CYPT.
Hi, folks. Just to clarify for you, the list of 7 through 40, they are not in a ranked order. So they are more or less aligned to our 9 domains of well-being, which is our framework for understanding child and youth well-being. They are all winners. We like to say these are ideas, and Adan, you spoke to it beautifully. Like, the work to get from 600 down was no small task, and many were left behind, so to speak, reluctantly. And so any on that top 40 should be considered a high priority for young people in the community.
That's great to hear, because I know that speaking with the 2 young people that I've had the privilege of being a stepdad to, they have all these concerns. And to your point on the discussion around the table, I believe sometimes they have a better discussion than happens here. I know that it's a hit to us, but it's true. I know.
And they don't always redirect their questions through the chair in the kitchen, do they?
Yeah, exactly. But I would encourage you to continue doing this work. And is there any thought of increasing that age from 18 to 25? Or the reason I say that is because I do have 2 young females that are under 25 that all of this affects them. And they're still in school. And Dan, I think you can attest to this. just because you hit 18 doesn't mean that your voice shouldn't be heard in a way.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that question. So currently we say 18-ish, but we would like that ish to be a generous ish, right? I think that everybody knows that it's not, as hopeful as I am, and Dan is an incredible young woman and will likely find herself into a path towards a successful life that we all look forward to. That's not the common path anymore. And so I've got a young person in my care who, at the age of 18, lost access to her psychiatrist and had to get in the line at the end of the line, just for an arbitrary date. Some kids don't even know their birthday out in the system. So what's the date for them that they age out? And so we are in the process, kind of on the precipice of starting a 10-year strat plan and thinking about expanding that number, either bringing it fully into focus or bringing it more clearly into kind of reserve focus, understanding that the children and youth up to the age of 18 are the upstream of the 25 and even the 30-year-olds. And the path forward for them doesn't look like we all expected it to look.
I'm glad to hear that, because 18 is not a stark stop on, hey, you're on your own. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
Councilor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Adan, and Jim and Allison and everyone for making time to work on these really important priorities and do the work to get here. It looks like, I think you said you're at McMaster, Adan, and so that's a lot of volunteer time to put on a student. So thank you for taking that on. This is kind of taking me back to a couple of weeks ago when we had the community safety and well-being plan, and it's, I guess, a generation above, or at least 18 plus, are more consulted in the creation of that plan. But I'm just curious how the two plans kind of work together, the children and youth, the priorities here, and is there overlap, or do the two tables talk to each other, around root causes that the youth have identified, and then how does that kind of lead into the child and youth, or the community well-being and safety plan? Is there a connection there, or what? It looks like there is. So if you could maybe describe that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question, through you, Chair. So the CYPT has a history of partnering with other initiatives in the community, the Immigration Partnership, Wellbeing Waterloo Region, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And so, yes, we're trying to find the best ways to leverage and maximize the resourcing that we have on very complementary and frankly shared issues. So belonging is a key underpinning to the work that we are doing. It's also absolutely an underpinning to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. So we are trying to design ideally a way that we work in which the under 18 is sort of held by the CYPT with good linkages into piece of work like the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And then likewise, folks around the CYPT table participating at the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan space. So that, similar to a couple of years ago, some of you may have attended our shared conference, we knew there were topics that cross across all ages. And so that's a good way of bringing partners together around and leveraging the energy that's in the room together. So we will keep doing that as we go forward.
Okay, thanks for that. That's really helpful to know. I have a couple of other questions, but I'll stick to one. I was just curious, and maybe it'll be in the 10-year plan, but how you evaluate the impact over time. Is there longitudinal studies, or are we following any of the youth? And then I'm also curious if, like, we have the good fortune to have the Future Cities Initiative working out of the University of Waterloo. And I don't know how much capacity they have, because there's sort of no end of challenges that they could take on. But I'm just curious if you partnered with them in terms of some of, research or longitudinal studies, et cetera.
Yeah, so if I start with, thank you for the question. If I start with longitudinal, the data component arose organically over the lifespan of the CYPT and has now become a kind of a hallmark, a major, probably the leading component and our number one aspect of our strat plan. Working with youth and child data is highly sensitive. And so the ability to not just collect it, but house it and protect it presents a number of challenges for a very small team. We do have a partner at the University of Waterloo, the Family Cycle Lab, and they are helping us with expanding and growing our effort. They help us with our ethics, et cetera. When we start to think 10-year vision, we think that we start to look like a center of excellence by default on child and youth well-being. But in order to cross that type of threshold more squarely, we would need to enter into longitudinal studies. And that's going to require a lot more funding, and it requires a lot more expertise, not just in the data handling, but in the understanding of what the data is. And that would also grow our capacity to partner. So I actually have a meeting with two of the members of the future cities from the University of Waterloo. We're super interested, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about thinking about spaces, thinking about places, right? Thinking about community. They have such a large stage, and they have your ear and the ear of local leaders. And so thinking about not just being so fortunate to have it in town, but how can we become the first adopters of those ideas and those policies. So the answer to your question about the longitudinal is that we have all the interest, and we are working on the resources to handle the complexity in the most respectful and within all the legal ramifications.
Great, thank you very much for that and the work you're doing.
I also have just one last thing to add to that, is that I do think there's absolutely power in numbers, so impact can be measured through that as well. So for reference, when I started as a youth connector and the first youth impact survey came out, we had only 300 responses for the youth impact survey, versus when I launched again in 2023, there was 1,800 responses. So 6 times more youth are getting involved in the survey and telling us about their experience and what they go through. And I think like that holds immense value as well. So I do understand there's like data reports and everything as well, but in terms of like youth coming out, it does take a lot to, even though it's an anonymous survey, to come out and share your full experience. And so I do just want to preface that there is 100% power numbers there.
Thanks for that, Dan.
Councillor Saladin.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for your report and for coming to council today. I'm curious, and I know that it's in your next steps, but if you guys have any insight into what kind of tracking of change you're looking for. And I understand, again, that one of the statistics you just gave is a way of tracking. I guess I'm really curious, and in particular on the youth decision-making and being involved, what does tracking that success look like?
Well, it looks important, I'll tell you that much. It's hard without having the same group time after time after time and having the ability to communicate. But in the effort of moving into these top 6 priorities, in the fall we had our annual conference, which is the first time those were shared broadly with the entire community and the members. The way that we are architected or designed is that we have these circles or planning groups that kind of live around the entity, the organization, and one of those is focused entirely on measurement for change. And so while we might be able to quickly understand and consider how to measure impact, we're talking about serving a group of up to 100 community organizations who don't have that capacity, not nearly that capacity yet, or the human resources or the physical infrastructure to be able to measure their own impact, in very detailed ways. And so we have to power ourselves up, and then we have to continue this effort of bringing up kind of the general capacity of the community member organizations. And that's one of the primary functions of CYPT, and we're doing that work, but it's a bit of a trailing effort. So we will continue to do the work that we do, where we will find the insights and we'll be able to kind of put them into a stream of potential causation or correlation. But until we get the investments, not just for CYPT, but for all the child and youth facing partners, it's very difficult for them to be able to report their impact. So just their ability to use our data to raise funds more consistently is a way of improving their sustainability. And in their strat plans, as we continue to kind of have an influence on what's important, measuring impact is ultra important. And so helping them to both respect and then invest when they can in improving that capacity, and building a shared capacity through the CYPT. Hopefully we get the muscle first, and then we learn how to flex it, and we can report back with better detail in the future.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that, if I may, Chair. With that, I guess in particular, I know I'm focusing on the youth and decision-making, but especially with your 18-ish age range for youth, and I like to use AMO's definition because I still fit in as a youth under AMO's 35 and under. So does Councillor Rodriguez. But what I would say is certainly having an impact on decision-making, and to your point that was mentioned earlier of considering youth and asking those questions and going out to the community. But I would also say, and especially with this being an election year, if you are 18 or older, you are eligible to run in the municipal election. So I would even just say giving to your involved participants who may be eligible and considering there are a lot of resources that are out there right now for youth running in municipal elections. And I don't know if it's of interest to you, Aden, and I won't put you on the spot, but there are a lot of resources for individuals like yourself who have moved through this and clearly are invested in making a positive impact in the community. So I would say maybe that's one factor you could look at too, is statistics of how many young people are getting elected into office too.
Yeah, it's a fantastic one. And I would knock on 100,000 doors for Adan and her peers if they were willing to do that. The macro trends of young people getting involved in politics aren't great, right? And unfortunately, it seems like the bigger the problems, that tends to attract them a little bit, but the belief that their effort can lead to impact and create meaning in their life is diluted. And so one of the best ways that you can show them that a life in politics is worth living is to create impact, and that it's worth the work, right? And we've got to speak to them directly in their voice to say, look, you made this important. We made it important. We did the hard work, and it mattered. Come and do the work with us. Dan, would you like to say anything about that?
I would like to say that I think I absolutely agree that it is a lot harder for youth to be involved in spaces like these when I think the pressure is very high in society where every single thing is very looked at very particularly, and I think youth, especially since COVID came, it's been really hard to have that sense of belonging anywhere. And so coming out into these spaces where you're kind of the voice for everyone is quite difficult. But I will love to say that I think having the Children and Youth Planning Table, and this is from my own experience, has absolutely helped to be a voice to more and more youth and to be way more involved in these decision-making processes that involve both adult and youth, and being able to bridge this gap, because oftentimes, more times than not, there is a discrepancy between what youth want and what adults hear. And so I just want to thank the CYPT for having a space that youth are able to kind of climb up these stairs to get closer to being in some sort of these spaces where they can be heard in more bigger spaces. So I was not told to say that. This is coming from me. But I just want to say that I absolutely do appreciate them having this platform, because it's not anywhere else. And I am staying off campus, so I do stay in Hamilton. And Hamilton does not have these resources as well, even though it is a place that has a college and a university. So there are like the 18-ish range of youth here. And we have the region of Waterloo that consists of our cities and townships that are getting these things from youth early on so that they can be prepared to be leaders in the spaces that they end up going to. So I think that absolutely helps, and it would help to shape that as well. And that's kind of the comment that I have. But yeah, thank you so much, Jim and Councillor.
Thank you for your question.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. What a great group you've got. And the increase from 300 to 1,000, was that you stated? 300 first and then
1,800.
Yeah, 1,800?
Yeah.
Well done. So how do we, I believe in the youth. I think they've had their eyes wide open, looked at what's going on, and I think they're going to be the revolution of tomorrow. I actually speak at a lot of the high schools, and I was at one of them speaking, and I said, you're going to bring the 60s back. you're going to put the flower in the end of the gun. And I asked them also to bring the music back. But anyways, some of these things that they've asked for, believe it or not, Regional Council has dealt with and are working through. The first one was long-term housing solutions. We're working on that. Increase access to physicians. I just met with Sylvia Jones a month or two ago, asking for an increase to have family doctors and nurse practitioners brought to the region. And she was very receptive to the motion we put forward. So we're hopeful that that's going to happen because there is funding for it. And a few of the others. So how do we get to communicate with these youth that what they're saying matters and that we're starting to put action to it? It moves slow, though. They have to learn politics does not move fast.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. One of the most striking things when we identified these 6, when they kind of had floated to the top and were firming up, was the striking nature of not just them being on your radar already, but the work that's already being done, right? But work that is hard and complicated and long and impermanent often when you arrive, at the end of your year, your budget year. And so I think you heard Dan say, keep going, right? I would invite you to find opportunities to communicate directly with youth and to say, this is the work that we're doing. Here is the priorities that some of your peers and maybe yourselves have asked for. And so let me take the time to give you an update on how we've been approaching this, how hard it is, and how hard we're working, right? That you're not giving up on these things. In my day job, I teach about trust and hope as being functional to community. You need to develop trust with them, right? I might love if they were the next hippie generation, and that would have been, that would have been our doing if they answer it in that way. But ideally, we develop a stronger bridge of trust, and belonging is our top priority in terms of well-being, and bridging is a really important component of belonging, where you can't get all the way to belonging quickly. And so you have to start slow and intentional and build these long bridges. And as excited as we will be to take your messages back to them, we would invite you, and if we can help, to get you in front of groups and populations of young people and teens. And please communicate it directly yourself. Or if you have information or progress that you're making that you think we could help to deliver, we're happy to send you reports and hope that you read them. Please send us your reports and highlight the pages that you think are most important for them to understand. And I think that bridging and that understanding helps them realize that these are complicated things. And I know that, again, a number of the young people that were in our sense making, they would talk about these things and that they've been talking about it for a long time. And then another youth would stand up and say, I know they're working on that, right? It's not done yet, but they recognize that it's hard and it's complicated. They don't expect everything to be solved, but they are growing to expect significant actions.
But if we don't teach them that you don't start today, it never gets solved. The other thing I forgot to mention, and I apologize, Region, is that the region is bringing transit to the townships. And I'm quite pleased with that. So, because I'm mayor of a township, so
Yeah.
so I think that's great. We've done some really great work, folks. We sometimes don't blow our own horn, but I'm glad they're asking the questions and putting it forward because they will be the leaders and the activists for tomorrow.
Yeah. And in our next survey, which opens up May 1st, we'll be asking all these questions again. And so hopefully we'll be able to bring you back their recognition of some of the progress that you've made. And hopefully those young people from the rural areas recognize that the transit is coming a little bit more, right? And that they don't expect perfection, but they appreciate the progress.
If I could also just add on to this, is that just bouncing back of what you said, Jim, is that we actually did have an intergenerational meeting with youth and adults when our first actions were starting out. So when we had the full-fledged 602 actions, and this is something that came up that, some of the adults in the room would say that this is something that's being worked on, and the youth would say, but there's no action, there's no implementation. How are we supposed to know? And so just to kind of put that into perspective, even this council meeting that's happening, I can almost assure you that there's not a single young person who knows about it, maybe besides myself, and that's because I'm present here and I'm present today. And I think that these conversations that are happening in council are so incredibly important that they need to be like the light needs to be shown onto it for youth to see that this is actively happening. The reason youth think that some of these things don't happen, I do agree that yes, some of the processes are slow, and that's not entirely everybody's fault sometimes, but if there's more of like a, ever since this, we have done this, it kind of shows that there's movement, even if it's slow, it's still movement. And I think like taking that step is absolutely important, because there's only so much the same faces can do to tell the youth it's happening, it's happening, it's happening, versus when it's actually coming from somebody who's in that position. So I know, Mayor, you just mentioned that there is transit coming to the townships. I mean, I personally did not have an idea of that, and I think that's so awesome, because so many of our actions had to do with transit. I wish I could tell you how many had to do with transit, and I wish I could tell you how many youth I had a conversation with were talking about transit, whether they're from the township or they're from the cities. And that makes me so happy, but I think every single youth deserves to hear these types of statistics so they can have hope in our older generation, because I do think some of the reason we want to be able to have our own voice too is because we don't see that hope. And all in all, like we need to look up to our elders, right? Like we need to be able to learn from them. We need to be able to not only learn from the mistakes, but learn from the achievements. And if we can't have hope in our older generation, what are we supposed to have as like, I guess like a framework of what we're supposed to become and who we're supposed to look up to? A lot of the leaders that they mention in history are like 1950s, 1960s. Why can't we have leaders that we look up to that are 2025, 2026? So I think if we did have these things, then youth would absolutely look up to the older generation, and we would have so much more hope and so much more thought going into these types of actions that are coming up, because we know, okay, this is already being done, amazing, what can we do next? So I think like it would be super awesome if even one of the counselors would be able to come to a youth session and see the types of amazing things that youth are able to say and the amazing thoughts that youth have, and actually be able to fulfill that and say, hey, like we've done this. I assure you the smiles on their faces will be so huge.
I think a number of us would love to come, or actually bring them to a council meeting. Fill the chambers.
Maybe bring a council meeting to them.
Yes, well, I don't know about that, but all the technology, but.
Councilor Urbanovic.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, Adam, for a great presentation and a great report. Clearly, a lot of passion and awesome work have gone into it, and a lot of great questions already asked by my colleagues. In particular, I just, when I look at that list of 6 actions and the focus on long-term housing, it just takes me sort of back to some of my courses in university and talk about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the importance of housing, and how that really is a foundation for everything else, including some of the other things that you've talked about today, like mental health and so on. And if we want to make sure we support young people and give them the best chance forward, that's such a critical part of it. As you embark on the next survey later this month, I guess I have 2 questions. I reflect on the world today, and I started this morning, and on one sense, I'm so energized because I started with a group of a few hundred youth who were focusing their day on the sustainable development goals and how they can go out and be agents of change in the world. And I look at the work that you've done, Adam, and the folks that have worked with you, and how you're bringing about change. And it reminds me that you're not actually leaders of tomorrow, you're leaders already today. But I guess as I reflect on some of the challenges that we know the world is facing, do you have any initial sense of maybe some of the things that we might see that may come back differently this time around than in the past? And the second part of that question is, as we reach out to different groups of young people, are there any things we know from past reach outs where maybe we miss certain groups and we need to connect with them in different ways and put some added resources into that?
Dan, you want me to start?
I can just start with one thing before answering the question, just to put into perspective that the youth that we heard from was about 2,500 youth voices were incorporated into these 600 actions. So that means that this includes cities and townships when we're talking about the voices that we heard from. So that's like a range of a lot of different youth coming from a lot of different backgrounds, coming from a lot of different living situations. So I just want to say that kind of fact before Jim kind of goes on to the rest of the question.
Awesome, thanks.
I'll start with your second question, Barry, first on making sure that we're getting enough of the right and the most diverse voices to give us a full picture. As one of the, so in the last report, we were able to create 9 sub-reports using disaggregated data, speaking about mental health and well-being, speaking about geography, speaking about specifically children from LSGB2QA populations and living with disabilities, for example. There were groups where we did not meet a threshold of being able to speak confidently from the number of responses that we received. For example, Indigenous youth, right? And one of the biggest failures of a data analysis is when we have to put a little asterisk there that says, we can't be confident in this number because we didn't get enough answers. In response to that, we have, working with Dan, who's the head of our data effort on the Backbone team, and working with our partners at Waterloo, we now have statistically weighted targets for each demographic group and differentiated communication strategies, where as the process goes and we're collecting the data on the next survey, we will be able to watch the different buckets fill up. And as some buckets move across a threshold of where we can say we have statistical relevancy, then we can start to focus our communication effort next on filling the next bucket and the next bucket and the next bucket, where at some point the next survey response, they're not all quote unquote equal. It would be more valuable to have a different one from a different voice that's missing. And so the apparatus of collecting the data has evolved and will evolve substantially. In your first question, I think you asked for a little crystal ball work. And I think if you take, Dan as a sample today, and if you were to look at the priorities that they arrived at through a process of being faced with very many things, I would expect they're going to see what you see, and I expect them to speak more loudly about it. In this last effort, they talk about bullying, and if you had the opportunity to sit at those tables and have the discussion, they didn't pull any punches. They said specifically in schools, it needs to be better in schools, and you know what else they said? And we have to take responsibility for it too. They are young, incredible humans, but they think in complicated ways and they're on top of things. So to answer your question, your first question specifically, I think that the things that are on your radar are going to be on their radar as well, and you would expect to hear about them. And you would expect to hear about them in really targeted, nuanced ways that specifically impact where they sit in their life cycle.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, and thank you to both of you. And Dan, you're absolutely right. 2,500 is a really, really impressive number for any kind of statistical work. And Jim, sort of taking the nuanced approach you folks are taking for this new one to make sure we statistically, I guess, collect statistically accurate reflections of each of those segments is going to be really important, so that we can do the best work possible. I know, in my own connections with the community right now, just sort of the lay of the land in the world and some of the geopolitical realities I'm finding are really heavy for young people and older adults. Everyone else is sort of probably too busy and stuck in their day-to-day life, but those two groups are really spending a lot of time thinking about it, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Thank you again to both of you and to everyone else.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you, Jim and Dan and Allison for being here today in this report. I worry a lot about the youth because I see the data that comes through, and it is constant. But I'll start with this. I will say that the work that you all are doing, it needs to be celebrated, because I'm sure there are models and or other areas that are looking to see how far you've come in terms of even the engagement to say, how did you do this? So I think there's a story that needs to be told on a bigger scale. Sometimes I think we minimize the efforts that we do and being humble. But when it comes to our youth, the exact opposite needs to happen, and you need to showcase. And I know I've had the opportunity to work with some of them at the Democracy in Action table. So, what I do have a question about when I looked at the spread of, things that came through, one of the things, and I know they're in no order, but was the employment. I hear a lot from youth, and I mean the 16, 17-year-olds that are really struggling to find employment. And what you've seen in those trends, I really worry about that because all of that feeds into a lot of what's here in the 6 themes that have been identified. And if you could speak to that and what potentially you might have been hearing and what youth are saying about youth. And Dan, I'm kind of looking to you as well as someone who's in post-secondary. And, there is a fear around where are we going to end up working after? And if that you're seeing that with the younger youth as well. Just kind of speak to that.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say that, yeah, there is absolutely a really big employment gap, not only with youth at that age, but youth at my age as well. Like in universities, there are some programs, including my own, that have a mandatory co-op, but because of the job market, a lot of students end up missing that. And I do think, though, a solution to this would be, I think there are some big brands out there that I feel like take advantage of manual labor through youth a lot. And I think they put it in the name as volunteering or as unpaid internships, which is absolutely fair for some causes. But I do think, like, if you're putting youth to work and it's for a good cause and you have the funds, you need to pay them. Like, the youth of this generation have so much of a skill set that they're willing to help out. They're willing to do all these things, but they're not getting any reward out of it. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems. I do think another thing is that we've put like even simple jobs that used to be like you can just walk in and give your resume have turned into something completely different. It's always just apply online, and applying online means a mass of 100 plus resumes going in there. And I think there's some jobs that you feel like I'm definitely qualified for this. I've had this experience. But some jobs take people who are overqualified, which I think is okay for some places, but I think we need to give opportunities to other people. I think a lot of this also has to do with nepotism. There's a lot of people who are already in these companies who only refer a family friend, who only refer somebody who's like related to them in some way, shape, or form. And because they've built the credibility at the company, that those are the same people who are coming into that company, which I think does not give a fair advantage to the youth who are qualified, because then they're going up against a chance that they'll never win. And I just think like that whole culture around employment, that everybody needs to be too qualified. They need to have this, they need to have this, they need to have this. There used to be some jobs that you could get with a high school diploma. And those same jobs now you can't get unless you have a bachelor's degree, which is so unfair because now, especially with the OSAP cuts, it's so much harder for youth to pay for their post-secondary education. And if youth aren't going into post-secondary education, but all the jobs require post-secondary education, where are youth supposed to go? How are they supposed to become the future? And I think like that's not something, unfortunately, that youth can control, but it's something that the higher ups can control in some way, shape, or form. But I just think like that's like kind of where the main issue lies. A lot of these things are just overlooked when it comes to youth. It's like they're scared to hire someone who's like of age 16 because they're like, it's just stereotypes. They're too young, they haven't matured yet, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. And that's so unfair because then you're not giving a chance to new opportunity. You never know what one person can bring that the entire company doesn't have. And it's just getting overlooked because sometimes one young mind can absolutely overpower like three older minds. And I think that just needs to have more light onto that, because there are some youth that have so much skill, so much power, and they're just never given the opportunity because of the way our world is.
Thank you. Spoken with true passion. I hope the media was listening to that, because that needs to be said very, very loud. The opportunities that should be there that aren't. When I was probably about your age, I had 2 jobs. And it was very easy to walk in, hand in the resume, and something has changed within our society. Jim or Allison, not sure if you want to speak to that.
So most young people historically get a first job through a family friend, right? When we talk about belongingness as being so central to all of this, belongingness means that people see and respect who you are as you are. And so having adults in your life in your early and middle teen years, those are the people who give you the first job. And it might only be a small job, but they're also the ones who take a reference call or help you get the next job or the next job and the next job. We're seeing an erosion of co-op programs where young people in high school, this used to be like a hallmark of secondary education, right? And it is in post-secondary. But not getting co-op means you're not learning the skills, but you're also not building the network. And we know the network, is where a lot of these jobs happen. A young person brought me a job the other day at a pet value, and they wanted a 3-year degree. Right? That 3-year degree employee is not going to be satisfied there for long. So the value or the impact on that person is different than a young person's first job that might last 6 months or a year. OSAP is being wound back and jobs aren't available to close the gap for young people. I think you heard in Adan a passion and a lived experience that says to you, this is on our radar. And this doesn't feel good. And I know as an adult looking at the numbers, there was a flip, which is great, that young women are finding higher levels of employment than young men. Young men are kind of getting left behind a little bit. We don't have an answer for that, right? But a lot of this starts with if we can't build strong communities that are connected, the relationships that get us our first and our second job, that dust us off when we miss a shift because we're just learning how this works, don't exist. And so it becomes a very transactional and adult world. And we're missing that kind of soft tissue that happens in teen life.
Yeah, thank you. I'm keeping track of that. There's lots of young people around who I know are looking for that opportunity and want to contribute and be part, and having a job and employment, it opens up opportunities for them. And I guess the only other question I have, just one more, Chair, and that is around the more accountability for bullying. And just to elaborate more on how you're working with the schools on this, because I think there is a big issue in schools in terms of bullying. And the way I see that is the earliest form of hate. That it starts very young for a lot of people. So how are you working with the school boards around the bullying and any of that, even with community partners as well?
I think there's a number of community partners where this is in their work, right? They're doing the work. But it hasn't gotten easier to get inside and work inside of schools or work with school boards and their resource structuring and their limitations and the complexities that they're dealing with are eroding the available resources. So this is a situation where we can build relationships and pathways, which we have, and strengthen those. We go and we speak on behalf of youth at their trustee meetings, that kind of thing, and grow the number of strong relationships that we have around the boards. But that's an area of needing to grow, right? We have a very small team, and we're not, we're funded, but not super well funded. And so the ability to build those relationships over time. Right now, we have to offer our support and monitor closely and hope that they're able to make the priority. I will say, in both boards, they have it on their radar as well, and it's not a quick solution. I think the biggest area of opportunity is the young people saying, we can help. You don't have to take it all on, adults. You can empower us and work with us, and we're willing to help and willing to change, right, to be a part of it. So I would like to be able to come back and report on that again in the future, given its importance and that we don't have the partnership that we would like in terms of depth to be able to know exactly. But we'd like to get back to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And Adan, thank you for speaking truth today and your passion that came through a few minutes ago. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Redmond.
I want to thank you for your work and your tenacity. Who knew you were going to get all these questions? Jim, your last answer sort of, I want to tag on that because that's where I wanted to go with this. And I can go back to the Smart Cities competition. I know Allison and Matt Chandy can do that, and then Councillor Shantz and I were part of that liaison. And I was always so impressed that there was representation from every corner of the region, and it was every background and nationality that you could assume. Jim, you mentioned, and it's not by way of complaining, but just an observation, that working with community in community is really hard. It's a hard thing to do. And I know my colleague already mentioned the community safety and well-being, and that's another model like this where we're working with community. So I wonder if you can just talk a little bit, there's some magic sauce or something that the Children and Youth Planning Table have had, that you've kept this engagement and you've built with this over time. I'm just wondering if you can sort of speak to how you've been able to keep this momentum going, because it's years now.
You want to speak to that?
Thank you so much for the comments and the memories that you brought up. I would say it's always been very, very key to us, the accountability back to young people. So when we go out in community and we're asking young people for anything, whether it's their time, their input, their attention, we better have good ways of showing them what difference that made. The survey is a good example. We've gone out 3 times. First time, it was a new thing. It was easy to say, we're excited about it. We hope you're excited about it. Come help. The next time, the questions start. What did you do the last time? I remember doing this last year. What did you do with it last time? And it became so clear how good of an answer we needed to have when those questions come up. And so what we've built here, as you can see, we call it the Youth Impact Survey. It is so much more than a survey. It is a listening to voices, working with young people on what change could look like, and actioning. And the fact that we're able to show that to young people, that they have lived experience of working through the cycle with us, helps them continue to be excited, I think, for this work, and continue to be excited for ways that they can be involved across the community. We see this as an opportunity to build citizenship and attachment and belonging to this community. So it's not just about what's in service to what we are hoping to do at the CYPT, it's in service of the community.
And I guess, Dan, one of the things that you said that really struck home with me was very early on, and again, we're going back to probably the beginning, and mental health was identified. And adults would say, well, we'll have to liaise with guidance counselors. And what the youth said is, no, I want an app for my phone, so nobody else needs to know. If I'm reaching out, I need that. You've recycled, you've moved through this process, and you're still there. So I guess I would just ask you, what keeps you coming back?
So I just want to say, I think like the CYPT team should absolutely pride themselves in their behavior towards youth. I think the way that I've been treated by each and every single one of those adults, it feels like they're another friend of mine. And I think that's so rare in like youth and adult relationships, that you kind of always feel of like an authority barrier, basically. Anytime you're talking to someone older, you're like, yeah, I know they're only saying this because I'm younger than them. And I think none of the CYPT team has ever made me feel that way. Ever since grade 9, I was 14 years old, and I'm currently 19 years old. And it's been 5 years that I've been connected to the CYPT. And every single time, without fail, I feel like I belong more than I did the last time. And I think that's what brings me back. It's that community. It's the sense of belonging. And I think that's a lot of the reason that so many other youth come back as well, is because they're given the opportunity that they're not given anywhere else. And I think like that's so fortunate that the CYPT exists. And I think the youth that have access to a CYPT so often are so fortunate, because I think every youth deserves this opportunity and deserves to have someone who's an adult in their life who they can reach out to and feel that sense of comfort and feel that sense of safety without a sense of judgment. And I think that's something that the CYPT does extremely well, hence why I'm still here.
Thank you very much. I guess this means Allison, Jim, and Matt, you guys aren't youth anymore, right?
Well, I do identify as youthful. Yeah, we actually just recently we revamped the structure of our steering committee to be a little bit more aligned directly with our strat plan. and we carved out some specific seats that hold, that face different aspects of the community and the needs. And we actually had a steering committee member who started, like Adan did, in her early teens, went off to university, has come back, worked in the community, and has now joined our steering committee. So we're starting to see that kind of full cycle. Talk about belonging. The question I would pose to you as adults is belonging, what it sounds and feels like is this place wouldn't be the same without you. How many young people are you making feel that way? And in how many places do you feel like that? Somebody can always come in and sit in your seat and do the same job and the tasks. But do you feel like, are we making young people feel like this city, this region, these townships wouldn't be the same without them? And if we can't say confidently yes, and if they're not taking the opportunity to tell us when given the opportunity, then we've got work to do.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you very much for your presentations, for your work you're doing today and throughout the years. I have two questions that I'd like you to comment on. One is about social media and the fact that the province is thinking or considering banning the use of social media for students, I think 16 and under, similar to Australia. And the other is that the Minister of Education has sent a memo to all school boards saying that there will be no politics in the graduation ceremony, including the speech from the valedictorian.
Okay, so let me start first by saying rules generally arise when norms fail. And so our norms of protecting them from these things being healthy in their lives aren't satisfying the need. Then I'll point to the research to say all of the research that we're seeing, the foundation that Australia is standing on when they make that bold move, right? And they know that it won't be perfect. There's lots of ways to get around an age barrier, but that it will work for very many young people. We would, it's in our nature to collect data and do research. And so we would point to the research. And all the research says that the social media specific ones are moving us in the right direction. Social media and technology allows people from outside of our community to come in and pressure the citizens that we might protect in physical ways with traditional systems, but we're failing to protect them from people reaching in from outside of our region and impacting their lives in negative ways across digital channels. And so personally, I'm very supportive of that and made to feel more confident that the efforts are right in at least that they are research-based. And while we may have waited too long to let the research build up, there seems to be enough. And so I would be very supportive, but we would open a conversation, bring that research into the conversation, kind of at our annual conference and through other channels. I would also say that having spoken to a number of our member organizations, this is on their radar. Right, because they're seeing the pressure, and the school boards are seeing the pressure of the mental health challenges and the behavioral challenges in the classroom and the attentional problems. Building weak relationships outside of your physical geography doesn't help you get the next job. Not the way that some activity after school does, not the way that having a choir still available in your high school gives you a relationship with people who are actually in your geography and starts to introduce you to adults who care for you who aren't necessarily your parents. So I would say that the research is becoming overwhelming, that we need to do a better job, and we should expect to see more adoption in that direction. Okay. Thank you for the question. That's a good question.
Okay. And perhaps, would you like to comment
Dan, did you want to comment?
On the Minister of Education?
Is there something specific, like related to your question, you mean?
Oh, I was just wondering what you would think youth feel about the Minister of Education sending a memo saying to keep any politics out of her graduation ceremony, including the valedictorian speech. I was thinking... Okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, given the raise in tuition and the cut in student loans.
I do think that is something that I disagree with. I think like that is the one thing, like a valedictorian speech is known for a student to be representing student body through a student voice. And I think like we've kind of lost the art of students being in protest type of fields and having student type of strikes happening. And there's a long process for that to happen. So for example, at McMaster, there was a quorum that needed to be met for 900 students to be there to even try to pass the tryout of having a strike for OSAP cuts. That's 900 students you're asking to come out on a Friday when majority of the students are commuters and just to get like a maybe for a strike. So I think like valedictorian speeches, and I think there also is a range, by the way, of being not too political and way too political. And I think there's absolutely a middle ground for that. But something like OSAP cuts is something that every student, majority of students will have to face, especially students who are not coming from the best background or who have to fund themselves and rely on grants. And I think that's something that students should be able to say, because that is showing that there's a student leader amongst the student body who can speak for other students. That absolutely goes to show that. And I think that's why there's so much importance on a valedictorian, because it shows that the students chose this person to represent them. And if they have something to say, then that should absolutely have some importance on it. So I personally disagree with that. I think that should be allowed. And obviously there should be, I think there is like a range of where you can go in terms of being political, but stuff that's affecting all students, stuff that has been on every student's mind, I think is 100% fair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're on our second round of questions here. Councillor Hunick.
I will make it quick, Chair Erb, I promise. Thank you. Hypothetically, if a councillor wanted to take action on some motions related to transit or housing or other initiatives specifically geared toward youth, how would we consult with you or members of CYPT to make sure that we are actually capturing youth voices in the way that they want to be heard?
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you so much. That is data in action, right? First of all, I would comment that you've got already a great group of young transit keen citizens, and I remember seeing them a few times before and being impressed at how well they engage in that process. Please do reach out to us. In fact, we'll take it away specifically, Councillor, to reach out to you.
Okay, that would be great.
But in general, if there are any of these things, if we can do anything to help you coordinate or get in front of a group or alongside of a group of youth, to have these kinds of conversations, we will do everything we can to facilitate it. So we're happy to try and create opportunities.
Yep.
And to ensure that we're communicating the schedule that we have of our opportunities to work with youth, children and youth, and make sure that you're invited, and that maybe not just invited once, but you're invited and then reminded and then reminded and then welcomed and then thanked gratefully after you attend.
You don't need
which
to thank,
you do all the time, and so I appreciate
you don't need to thank me gratefully. It's part of our role in council. And so I, as well as many of my council colleagues, I'm sure, would be happy to read any reports that you can send us and happier to attend events. And although council meetings might be boring for the 9 to 18-year-old range, I highly encourage any of them to be in the audience for any council meetings, because the things that we say, the things that we speak about, and the way that we speak about them, and the decisions we make may be different when we're looking at them in particular. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
Councillor Leggett.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go back to your 6 items, because when I look at this is data in action. This is not your survey, right?
That's right. This is downstream from
This
the
is
survey.
because you did 2021 survey, 2023 survey.
That's right.
And so this is data in action from at the latest, the 2023 survey.
Yep.
And you say here that the vast majority of these actions are similar to what we heard from youth in 2021. When I look at those, the majority of those have to do with mental health or addiction. So that, I think that's why I'm troubled by the fact that they're not mentioned in your 6. I know you're saying they're derived from that, but there's no actual solid mention of that. So if you could just help me understand something here as well. You've got 74 voting members of the youth planning table, which are adult or adult-run organizations, correct?
Yep.
So when you look at the number of people, youth who were surveyed, what did you say, 1,800?
1,800, yeah.
1,800, and then you had 600 responses. So does that mean that of the 1,800, many of them were multiple to get, like the same things to get to the 6?
No, there were 1,800, and then there were an additional 600 involved in the insight gleaning. So once we generate the statistical reports, then we take it back, and we had 600 in-person sessions with young people interpreting and moving those into action.
So those are in the sense-making sessions in the Youth Summit? That's how that comes, oh, you're helping me understand this, so thank you for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so were they the same people? Did you reach out to the same ones who had done the survey and said, hey, guys, we're doing the summit, we're doing those sessions. Do you want to have input into that?
So technically, we're incapable of doing that explicitly because we don't have all of the contact details attached to the survey results. But there is an opportunity to sign up and to share their information, and we use the same channels to go back to them. So while we are able to hear directly from some children and youth who come to the sense-making sessions that they have answered the survey, we don't have an ability to go back to them directly for a long period of time because of the data and the privacy concerns.
Okay.
That's a mechanical challenge, but we do hear in the surveys from time to time that, this survey is what gives them hope, or this survey being asked and then being a part of the process where they self-identify that they've been along in the process more. Do you want to add some more?
Yeah. Through you, Chair. What I'd like to point out is the other thing we hear from young people is a survey's not for everyone, right? Not all young people are going to want to or gravitate towards a survey. We actually find that the sense-making conversations tend to attract a different cross-section of young people. So young people that prefer a group conversation, a dialogue. And so Jim's correct. We do have some that have been part of the survey, but we get a whole other cross-section of young people through the sense-making process.
So who diluted it? I don't mean that in a negative sense, but who took it down to 6? Was that the adults in the room or was that the youth?
Dan, do you want to talk about the process of getting,
Yes, I can absolutely talk about this. So we started with 600, and there was kind of like the 600 came after. It was filtered from some of them, the responses were just kind of comments like, you've done a great job. And that doesn't count as an action, right? So that was kind of filtered first through the backbone team, and then we had 600 actions. These 600 actions first was taken into an intergenerational space where we had youth and adults. So the backbone team, which includes myself and the 3 other youth connectors that were on there, along with some of the adults on the backbone team, who kind of split them into the 9 domains that the Children Youth Planning Table has. And then in that intergenerational meeting, we brought the adults and youth in the room to kind of cut that down just a tiny bit. But when we were actually getting down to like the nitty gritty of it, when we got down first round to 150, that was all youth. That was all youth. And then after that, we had another sense-making session that was all youth. And I think the latest one, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim and Allison, but I think that one included adults. So it was more emphasis on youth voice, but adults were absolutely in the room helping out in some of these steps.
Yep, that's
Okay,
accurate.
thank you. That helps me understand. By the way, sense of belonging comes from familiarity as well. So thank you for sticking with this because it becomes familiar, and that's that sense of belonging. And I've got to say, when you talk about the where people came back another year and said, what have you done with it last time? That's kind of what the adults say to us when we send out a survey. They say, why would I do this? You didn't do what I asked you to do at the last survey. So I don't see that the apple's going to fall far from the tree here.
Yeah, and just quickly on your response about the mental health data, if you recall, the time and place of 2021 was a very acute flare-up of mental health challenges and mental illness challenges. And so it's reasonable, and in a lot of data, you would have seen a very overweighted but accurate representation of mental health and mental illness that has not quieted, right? But it was very acute in that early, I don't know what to call it, early, late COVID, wave 3 kind of time frame. And so that has dissipated for some. That has maybe become less complicated for some and has escalated to more complicated for others. And so that would explain some of the significant spike that we would have seen in the 2021 data.
But if I could also add one more thing, kind of mentioning what Allison already said, is that these are not ranked. So the top 6 doesn't mean like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just actions, 40, that just happen to be there, not from this has the most importance, this has the least importance. However, if you kind of scroll down in the list of 40, there's like 4 back to back that are just mental health. So it shows that there are absolutely some mental health issues, but a lot of these actions also are like the root causes of mental health. So bullying, racism, harassment, sexual abuse, etc. These are like the root of some of the mental health causes, and there's a lot of these actions. So even if not directly said mental health, it still does relate to mental health.
Okay, thank you for your responses. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, Anand and Allison and Jim, thanks for the presentation. I hope you can tell by the response and the questions from council members that everyone appreciates the work that you're doing, the importance of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And this is for information. Sorry,
Sorry,
this is for
we're happy to
information.
make ourselves available to anybody who wants to ask more questions.
And this is for information purposes only. All right, item number 8, council committee tracking list is for information. There are currently no items on that tracking list. Under number 9, other business. Council Gowing.
Thanks, Chair. I decided to remove the notice of motion today, looking at the timing of where we are today. So I'm going to ask that it be moved to council on April 22nd. And I've sent it out to all council members on looking into Municipal Housing Corporation.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I apologize, I meant to ask this during the housing discussions, but I'm curious if staff worked with the Community Legal Information Project, CLIP, over the past 6 months. They were running a program that was funded by the Law Society of Ontario, and their work was providing free legal advice to vulnerable people precariously housed or experiencing homelessness or violence. And they engaged with like several thousand individuals over 6 months on an early intervention. I'm just curious if staff were aware or connected with them.
Both Ryan and I are shaking our heads. Our interaction generally is with the Waterloo Regional Legal Clinic. They do a lot of eviction prevention work. I'm not familiar with CLIP, but we can take it away and see if somebody else knows more about it.
Okay, they just did a report on it last week, and they're hoping to be funded again by the Law Society, but they did some really, really valuable work, and it's I think it's been really well done, and it was very inexpensive as well.
Okay, noted. We'll look it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think they made a presentation to us, their launch.
Yes, you're right.
Ago,
Yes,
if I
they
remember
did.
correctly.
Alex Pavlov.
Any other questions? Our next meeting is on May the 5th. And I'm now ready to entertain a motion to, really? Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Gowing. You can use your e-scribe. Anybody opposed? Carried unanimously.